But then there's the question that has he put more pressure on Saturday night? I'd probably argue not, because it was a must-win anyway. You know, you're not going to get any extra leeway or breathing room because you're in the fifth round of the Carabao Cup if you go and lose a fifth Premier League game on the bounce. So, you know, I can see this one as collateral damage, really, if Liverpool, you know, put a foot in the right direction on Saturday night.
Yeah, interesting on the pressure stuff. Then he was asked, obviously you were in the post-game press conference, Arne Slot was asked about does he feel under a bit more pressure after that result, and he said, I don't think it's possible if you lose 5 out of 6 games that there is now, after 6 out of 7, even more pressure. If you're on a run of results like this and you play for Liverpool or you manage Liverpool, you know the pressure's there, and I don't think it's changed much after this loss. So basically what you're saying is that it doesn't really make that much difference. It's all more to do with Saturday. But Liverpool have lost 4 Premier League games. In all comps now, Paul, they've lost 6 games out of 7, which is mad. You know, if you think of how well it was going this time last year, Liverpool were comfortably on their way to winning the Premier League title. They were waltzing through that European stages of that competition. No one could lay a glove on Liverpool in terms of results. In Europe, obviously, they're doing well in the League Cup. They eventually got to a final as well. It's chalk and cheese, basically, 12 months apart. But this idea of pressure on the manager, like, I get it, because, like I say, you're the Liverpool manager, you don't lose games, and losing games, it will always bring added pressure with you. But where are we on that, like, in terms of this pressure? Like, you mentioned before, like, he needs to beat Aston Villa, but, like, what if he doesn't? Like, what conversations are we having, and when do we start having maybe really difficult conversations? Because I suppose that is on the mind of some supporters. I know it is, because we get messages all the time about it. Yeah,
I mean, I think what you know, the beauty of doing the job that I do is I speak to loads of supporters daily, you know, not necessarily online, but it's, you know, go and get my haircut, for example. The barber will want to chat about footy, you know, friends who are Liverpool fans. So speaking to supporters of, you know, a wide depth of you know, a wide variety of supporters every single week. And I don't think I've heard anyone in person talk about Slot's job being at risk at this point. I think it's a dreadful run of form, and it's, you know, it's some of the worst that you've seen for... There was that statistic a couple of weeks back, wasn't it, that it was as bad as it has been since 2014 under Rodgers. I'm not quite sure where we are now with the run of 6 and 7, but it needs to change. Of course it does, but, you know, you look at what was achieved 6 months ago, was it, when Liverpool won the Premier League, and, you know, that day the supporters were able to have for the Tottenham game, and then the trophy lift against Palace, you know, the month that was in between those 2 games, you know, it was just a victory lap, wasn't it? And some of the joyous, you know, greatest afternoons that supporters have had, you know, supporting Liverpool. So I think we're a long way at the moment from talking about jobs being on the line. But there's no doubt it needs to change. Absolutely it does. You know, because if it doesn't, then you do have to start sort of looking at that. And I'm sure people at the club will be of a similar mind. But yeah, it's just about, you know, changing the optics, isn't it? Changing the perception, changing the narrative, and you're never that far away from that happening. You know, Manchester United have now won 3 on the bounce. People are talking about them putting together a really good run, and, you know, are they out of the woods? Are they over the worst? All that sort of stuff. And this is a team who, had it not been for some historically bad teams in the relegation zone last year, might have even been relegated. They were that bad. So, you know, you're never that far away from the narrative changing, and that is something that Slot, you know, after his 18 months or so at Liverpool, will be fully aware of.
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting as well, because, like, the conversations he had yesterday after the game, he's talking about, like, injuries and various things. I cast my mind back to 12 months, and everyone was like, it's really cool how open and honest Arne Slot is in press conference. Like, if, you know, he beat Man United, and then he goes on the telly and tells everyone how he beat Man United and why he did what he did, and he goes on and tells, well, we changed this, and we put him deeper, and we moved him, and we played in these spaces, and, you know, he done all this. And then there was talk about, like, you know, the players are fit, so I can ask them to go again. And yet 12 months later, I don't think he's making excuses. I think he's just, again, giving reasons for things. But all of a sudden, because you're losing, then that is spun in a negative way. And that's what losing brings. That's kind of the pressure of Liverpool manager. Every word you say is microanalyzed to the millionth degree. That's part of the territory. Yeah. And I think that's where maybe, you know, I don't know, pressure might be the wrong word, but, like, just basically, everyone's a bit fed up with all this kind of thing. And it's, at some point, people get over fed up where they start kicking off. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but like I say, Liverpool play Aston Villa, Real Madrid, Manchester City. There's no guarantee you could lose to all those games in any season. All of a sudden, then I think this spiral of negativity does start really swirling. Would that be fair to say? Yeah,
100%. Liverpool could play well in all 3 games next week and still come up with nothing. So that is a real prospect. I think at this point you're just looking to see some sort of plan. What is the plan? Don't concede inside the first 15 minutes. Grow into the game, establish what your game plan is, and try and work to it. And let's try and get the best out of these players who are supremely gifted players. They've shown it. The fact that they are champions is proof of that enough. And we're still waiting for players like Florian Wirtz to take flight, and Alexander Isak is carrying a bit of an injury at the moment. But there was a grand plan here in the summer for this incredible, historical outlay. So let's start seeing it. We're into November now by the time they play Aston Villa. And I've been saying it for a few weeks now. Liverpool could really just do with a home game that's just a bit of a gimme. They're expected to dominate the ball, expected to create chances, and expected to win. We're going to get, where are we, maybe 3 months into the season before anything like that arrives. Villa's probably the most straightforward of the season so far. And this is an Aston Villa team who were in the Champions League last season. So it's difficult, but you just want to see, well, I don't know about anyone else, but I would like to just see some sort of plan where Liverpool aren't on the back foot. They're not chasing the game. They're not having to throw the structure of the team out the window to chase a late goal, and just try and see what they've been working on in training all week.
Working back to this question around the word pressure and that kind of stuff, which obviously was asked to Arne and he answered the question. You've spent a lot of time around Arne Slot in the last year or so. I'm just wondering, sometimes when managers are feeling, again, go back to the word pressure, they change how they are, in press conferences, and they might be saying certain things or they might be acting in certain ways, but you can also, obviously when you're up close to someone, maybe they act a little bit differently, or they start saying things, or they get a bit chirpy. Has there been any change in Arne Slot recently? Because again, I've only seen it on the TV and heard him speak. Yeah. He seems exactly the same fella to me, a little bit more fed up because they're losing. But I haven't noticed any of this, where wild things or kicking off at journalists or biting back at questions. It feels like he's still the same guy, but is that the case?
Yeah. I'd say he is very much on an even keel. He said something recently which was quite interesting. The elite players never get too high, and this is when they're winning. Never get too high when they're flying. They never get too low when they're in the doldrums. They stay on an even keel, and that enables them to keep those consistency levels. So I think he sort of thinks along those lines himself. So no change. And for me, I thought the team selection yesterday was basically a big not red flag, a big sort of, I'm not panicking here at all, because it would have been the easiest thing for him in the world to think, I need a win here, let's pick Mo Salah, let's pick, Szoboszlai, Van Dijk, all the big guns. But he's gone the other way with it and think, well, I need the results on Saturday, so I'm going to pull them out the firing line. Let's give these kids a run out in the same way you would for any normal fourth round tie in the Carabao Cup. So that was interesting. And he hasn't really changed his demeanour. He hasn't got tetchy or riled up or taken a question the wrong way. He's been exactly how he's been throughout the course of his time at Liverpool, which has, I have to say, been a joy to deal with week to week.
I think you're right there. I think if he's felt like his job was at risk or he was under serious pressure, he plays a really strong team and just tries to get that win. Yeah. He's clearly got confidence in the fact that I can carry on with the plan and try and execute the plan. That was a clip from Journo Insight. To check out the whole show, head to redmenplus.com or click the link in the description.